One method of effective reform of the finances was the
Chamber of the Justice,
which was a system that Louis used to cancel debts that he owed to financiers and nobles from borrowing money from them for military purposes, mainly, and any financiers or nobles that were found to have made excessive profits were found guilty and all debts to them were cancelled.
Another effective method of reform was the
Colbert's new tax initiatives. During the war, in theory, the Thai should have collected 56 million, when in fact the Treasury only received 60 million. Colbert made several new changes to make this more efficient. One of these was that the tax collectors, who previously would have got 25% of the tax, now only got 3.75%. And corruption was able to be rooted out and stopped. This meant that the Thai was now only set at 32 million and Treasury received 24 million of this.
A further method of reforming the French financial system which was effective was the
reduction of the renters. France basically had a large amount of renters that they had to pay annually, and to reduce this using the Chambre de Justice, the French accused many of their renters that they were charged using exorbitantly high annual fees, and so they either cancelled them or they rescheduled them at lower annual interest rates. This saved them a large amount of money and increased their revenue by great amounts.
A final, penultimate effective method of reform was
increasing indirect taxes and the reduction of the Thai. In 1658, Fouquet reduced the Thai from 50 million livres to 42 million.
Colbert then reduced it by a further 3 million in 1662, and to make up for this loss in revenue, they increased indirect taxes, which taxed all the stratas of society, including the nobles.
And the final method of effective reform of the finances was
to reduce unjust tax exemptions. One way Colbert did this was introducing the recherche de noblesse, which was a system that aimed to persecute false nobles who were claiming unjust tax exemptions.
Intendants were given wide powers to oversee the collection of the Thai and could impose their own assessments on the undertax. They could therefore then go back to Louis and inform him of people being undertaxed and therefore increase revenue.
Another way of reducing unjust tax exemptions was by increasing indirect tax and decreasing direct tax, for example on luxuries, which even the Third Estate had to pay for, which would increase the revenue.
On the other hand, some of Colbert's reforms were ineffective. One example of this was
they had an ongoing and costly war between Spain. Colbert was against this, as the king had to exempt a lot of money from the wealthy people and the people in general of the provinces. This made it unable for him to bargain with the wealthy anymore, and people over the provinces were borrowing money from one another to go towards the crown. The king also cut things such as luxury and office holders.
a further example of his reforms being ineffective were
He didn't properly tap into the wealth of the privileged.
This is difficult for intendants because the nobles often intimidated them and used their power against the tax collectors, and therefore excused themselves and gave themselves great exemptions from tax.
similarly
The tax officials, although Colbert tried to implement a policy of protectionism around the humble agents who collected tax, there was a lot of procrastination amongst the army advisors as well, who simply refused to give up a lot of their revenue. Also, he tried to suppress surplus, but this was also ineffective as there was no alternative system, meaning that they couldn't simply give up a lot of offices.
another example of his ineffective reforms
Was sale of offices during wartime. 45,000 was sold, which ended up causing more long-term problems, and it was also inefficient and a costly bureaucracy.
and finally
the damaging impact of the Chambre de Justice. The Chambre de Justice was an effective way of creating short-term expedients. However, as a potentially ruinous venture for financiers, it was a disincentive to loan to the Crown. This made borrowing a less effective means for raising revenue, as the Crown was forced to raise tax on loans, which it would eventually have to pay back.
An example of this was the arrest of Fouquet on the 5th of September 1661. Fouquet was falsely accused of corruption by Louis and Colbert, who had vowed him his enemy since 1658. Fouquet's debts of 12 million livres loans of 12 million livres were cancelled and he was arrested. This disincentivized lots of loaners.